From signal to power, the transformation of regulatory and quality intelligence. Introduction. Information is not power, execution is. Modern organizations are drowning in information yet starving for control. Regulatory environments, especially in highly governed industries like life sciences, generate a constant stream of signals, guidelines, and enforcement actions, as well as they also generate policy shifts and emerging frameworks. Historically, companies believed that collecting and monitoring this information constituted intelligence. That assumption has now collapsed. Information that is not translated into coordinated action is operationally worthless. The evolution of regulatory and quality intelligence represents a structural correction to this failure. What is emerging is not merely a refinement of compliance practices but a redefinition of how organizations convert external signals into internal control. Intelligence is no longer defined by awareness, it is defined by the ability to impose change across systems. The transition from passive monitoring to active enforcement marks the difference between organizations that survive regulatory complexity and those that are eventually destabilized by it. The collapse of passive intelligence. For decades, regulatory intelligence operated as a surveillance function. Teams monitored updates from regulatory bodies, cataloged changes, and disseminated information across departments. This model assumed that awareness would naturally lead to action. In reality, it produced fragmentation, delay, and systematic vulnerability. The flaw was structural. Monitoring creates knowledge, but it doesn't create ownership. Without ownership, there is no execution. Without execution, there is no adaptation. Organizations become repositories of regulatory data while remaining operationally unchanged. This disconnect led to predictable consequences: missed regulatory signals, delayed responses, compliance gaps, and ultimately enforcement actions. Quality intelligence emerged as a response to this failure. It reoriented uh, functional the function away from observation and towards intervention. Instead of asking what regulations exist, organizations began asking how those regulations alter internal systems, processes, and controls. This shift transformed intelligence from a passive activity into an active instrument of governance. Regulatory intelligence versus quality intelligence, a functional divide. At a structural level, regulatory intelligence and quality intelligence operate on the same inputs but produce different outputs. Regulatory intelligence interprets signals through the lens of approvals, submissions, and strategic positioning. It asks how regulatory changes affect the organization's ability to bring products to market and maintain regulatory alignment. Quality intelligence, by contrast, focuses on operational compliance. It examines how those same regulatory signals impact the organization's ability to maintain control over its processes, systems, and quality management frameworks. It is concerned with whether the organization can continue to operate without triggering inspection findings, enforcement actions, or systematic breakdowns. The distinction is not semantic, it is functional. Regulatory intelligence shapes external strategy. Quality intelligence enforces internal discipline. Together, they form a dual layer system where one interprets the external environment and the other ensures internal adaptation. Without this duality, organizations either become strategically blind or operationally unstable. The intelligence life cycle, from signal to implementation. The defining feature of modern intelligence system is the establishment of a closed loop cycle. Intelligence is no longer a static output but a continuous process that moves through multiple stages, each requiring explicit control. The life cycle begins with the detection of regulatory signals. This involves scanning a complex landscape of regulatory bodies, guidance documents, enforcement trends, and emerging frameworks. Detection alone, however, is insufficient. Signals must be triaged and prioritized based on their potential impact. Once prioritized, the organization conducts impact assessment. This stage requires contextual interpretations where regulatory changes are mapped against the organization's specific processes, products, and risk profile. This is where intelligence transitions from abstract information to concrete relevance. The next stage is action planning. Responsibilities are assigned, timelines are established, implementation strategies are defined. The stage is frequently this stage is frequently where organizations fail as ambiguity in ownership leads to delays and internal conflict. Implementation follows, where changes are embedded into operational systems This includes update procedure, restraining personnel, modifying controls, and ensuring alignment across departments. The final stage involves governance and oversight, where progress is monitored, risks are escalated, and accountability is enforced. The life cycle transforms intelligence into a mechanism of control. Each stage closes a potential gap, ensuring that no signal remains unacted upon. The organization effectively becomes a responsive system capable of adapting to regulatory change in real time. Structural weaknesses where the systems fail. Despite the clarity of this model, most organizations struggle to execute it effectively. The failure points are consistent and predictable, revealing underlying structural weaknesses. The first failure occurs at the level of signal ownership. Without clearly defined responsibility, regulatory signals are lost in organizational handoffs. Information moves between departments without triggering action, creating blind spots that only become visible during inspections or enforcement actions. The second failure emerges during action planning. Even when gaps are identified, organizations often lack the authority structures necessary to enforce implementation. Departments' data responsibility, timelines slip, and critical changes remain unexecuted. The third failure is resource constraint. Subject matter experts who are essential for impact assessment and implementation frequently overloaded. This creates bottlenecks where intelligence accumulates without processing through the life cycle. The fourth failure lies in the inability to demonstrate value. Preventive action is inherently invisible. When intelligence systems function effectively, they prevent problems that never materialize. Leadership, however, often measures value through observable outcomes, leading to underinvestment in intelligence capabilities. These failures are not operational accidents, they are symptoms of weak governance and misaligned incentives. Organizations that cannot enforce accountability will consistently fail to convert intelligence into action. Governance and network. The architecture of control. To address these weaknesses, organizations are constructing formal governance structures and cross-functional networks. Governance serves as the central authority layer where decisions are made, process is tracked, risks are escalated. It transforms intelligence from a decentralized activity into a coordinated system. A cross-functional network acts as the execution layer. Intelligence champions and subject matter experts are embedded into departments, creating a distributed system of responsibility. These networks ensure that regulatory signals are interpreted and implemented within the relevant operational context. The combination of governance and network creates a hierarchical yet flexible structure. Authority flows from centralized government while execution is distributed across specialized units. This model allows small intelligence teams to coordinate large-scale organizational responses without losing control or visibility. Artificial intelligence amplification without authority. Artificial intelligence has been introduced as a tool to enhance intelligence workflows, but its role remains limited. AI excels at surveillance, filtering large volumes of information to identify relevant signals. It can summarize documents, categorize updates, and route information to appropriate stakeholders. However, AI lacks contextual understanding. It cannot assess how a regulatory change interacts within an organization's specific processes, risk tolerance, and strategic objectives. Impact assessment, the most critical stage of the intelligence lifecycle, remains dependent on human judgment. Regulatory framework reinforce this limitation. Emerging guidelines require human oversight in any AI-driven decision-making process, particularly in environments where compliance and safety are critical. This measures that AI functions as an argumentation tool rather than a replacement for expertise. The implication is clear. AI reduces informal noise and it doesn't create authority. Decision making and enforcement remain human responsibilities anchored in organizational structures rather than technological systems. Strategic implications intelligence as a competitive weapon. The transformation of regulatory and quality intelligence extends beyond compliance. It represents a broader shift in how organizations compete. In environments characterized by complexity and rapid change, the ability to convert information into action becomes decisively advantageous. Organizations that master this capability operate with shorter decision cycles, faster implementation lifelines, and greater operational stability. They identify risk before they materialize, adapt to regulatory changes ahead of competitors, and maintain a consistent state of readiness. Conversely, organizations that remain trapped in passive intelligence models accumulate information without converting it into control. They react to changes rather than anticipating them, exposing themselves to penalties, delays, and reputational damage. The difference between these two outcomes isn't knowledge, it is execution intelligence, when properly structured, becomes a mechanism for imposing order on uncertainty. It allows organizations to reshape their environment rather than being shaped by it. Conclusion: control is the end state of intelligence. The evolution of regulatory and quality intelligence reflects a fundamental principle: information has no inherent value. Its value is realized only when it is transformed into coordinated, enforceable action. This transformation requires structure, governance, accountability, and the disciplined execution of a closed loop life cycle. Organizations that fail to internalize this principle will continue to operate in a state of reactive instability. They will collect data, generate reports, and maintain the illusion of awareness while remaining vulnerable to external shocks. Those that succeed will treat intelligence as an instrument of control. They will build systems that not only detect change but enforce adaptation. In doing so, they will convert uncertainty into managed risks, complexity into structured advantage. The outcome is not incremental improvement, it is a shift in power. The organization that moves fastest from signal to implementation doesn't merely comply with its environment, it dominates it.